Stanford University.
Okay, well, welcome to lecture number 8 of Stanford CS 193P, winter of 2015. Today we have two major topics we're going to talk about. One is view controller lifecycle, which is your view controller gets born, it lives and does a lot of things, and then it dies. And so you want to be able to find out about all those things that are going on, and you can. I'm going to have a brief demo about that, and then we're going to go into auto layout. And I keep promising I'm going to talk about it, and so I am finally going to talk about auto layout. Of course, you already know a lot about auto layout, and I'm going to review that. Then we're going to talk about an important piece of auto layout that we haven't talked about so far, which is size classes. And then I'll be doing a humongous couple of demos on auto layout because, you know, it's the kind of thing you're going to have to see it to really understand it. But first, let's talk about view controller lifecycle. When we refer to the view controller lifecycle, we're just talking about a sequence of messages that is sent to your view controller as it progresses through its lifetime. Why do we care about this? Well, because you very commonly want to override these messages that are sent to the view controller in your subclass to find out what's going on. Because you might need to do things, make certain decisions or whatever at certain points in your view controller's life cycle. So let's talk about the cycle and how it goes. It starts off with creation. 99% of the time, this is from a storyboard, right? As you know, you create these scenes in the storyboard. Those scenes have a view controller class associated with them, and you're segueing to an MVC. Even if you create an MVC in code, which I didn't even talk about how to do. Maybe we'll talk about a little later in the quarter, but you could look up in the documentation. It's quite easy. Even in that case, you're going to instantiate a view controller using identifier in a storyboard. Okay, and that's how you're going to get the view controller. So creation is almost always from a storyboard. And there is an init that gets called. It's kind of a weird init with coder. I'm not going to talk about it too much. I mentioned it a little bit in the reading assignment, number 1 or number 2. I don't remember. So there is an init, but we try to stay away from inits if we can, if they're somewhere else. And in the view controller lifecycle, there's a lot of somewhere else's to initialize things besides in the init. So I'm not even going to talk about the init right here. Okay, what happens after that initialization, though? Well, the first thing is you get prepared if you're being segued to, right? The next thing is your outlets are going to get set. Okay, the system's going to wire up all those @IB outlets that you have. And then your view controller is going to appear on screen, and then it might disappear, and then it might reappear, and then disappear. Okay? And its geometry might change because of auto rotation or something else happens and changes the geometry of your view, so that's happening. And then in obscure cases, you might have a low memory situation on your device, and the system might try to get you involved to resolve that. And we'll talk about that briefly. All right, so that's the cycle. So what are these methods that are involved in that cycle? Well, you know about the preparation. That's prepare for segue, and some other MVC. That's what prepares you. And you know about outlet setting, right? Just system automatically sets your outlets from your storyboard. So the next thing that happens is loading. Is your view gets loaded. Well, we call the outlet setting really the loading process. And when it's done loading, it sends you this message, view did load. Okay, view did load is an exceptionally good place to put stuff to initialize your view. Why is it so good? Because you're prepared by whoever's segueing to you, and your outlets are all set. Okay, so you're in great shape to go do things to initialize your view because you are all kind of set up and ready to go. Now, when you override view did load, it's really important to call super view did load. And in fact, in all these lifecycle methods, you always want to call super. You can either call it the beginning or the end. It's kind of up to you. Doesn't really matter usually. But you definitely want to let super have a chance to do it. Okay? So don't forget about that. Now, one thing that you often want to do in view did load is update your UI. Okay? Now, you're going to be updating your UI in the property observers of all your things that change the model. And you should continue to do that because your view controller might be on screen already loaded. Someone changes the model, you've got to update the UI. But when you're first having your thing created and you want to update your UI, it's kind of, you know, your property observers in your model and aren't really updating the UI because your outlets aren't set maybe because you're in the prepare for segue phase, right? So a lot of times you get to view did load and you haven't really been able to update your UI because your outlets haven't been set. So view did load is a great place to then update your UI. So if you factor out updating UI into a separate method, like we did in the demo called update UI, but you can call it whatever you want, or you could even have a couple of different UI updating methods, calling those in view.did_load is very common, okay, because your view is ready to be updated. However, you have to be careful here because your geometry is not yet set, okay? You only get loaded once. When you first come out of the storyboard and you get prepared, your outlets get set, you get view.did_load. That's it. That only happens once in the lifetime of a view controller. But your geometry, like what your bounds are, that has not been set yet. That's not going to be set till later in its lifetime. Okay? So do not do, I should have put this in red, do not do geometry-related things in view.did_load. Okay? You can do almost everything else in view.did_load, but do not do that. Okay, and we'll talk about where you do those things in a moment here. All right, next one in the life cycle is view will appear. Okay, so that's sent to you right before you're going to appear on screen. Okay, now that could be right after view.did_load, or it could be a long time after view.did_load. It depends on what's going on in your UI. Okay, and view will appear gets an argument, which is whether it's an animated appearance or not. Okay, usually you don't care about that. And when would your appearance be animated? Well, you know, you're in a navigation controller and someone presses to segue you on screen, you'll slide in. That's an animation. Okay? View will appear. This could happen all the time. This could happen repeatedly in the lifetime of your view controller because your view controller can come on screen or go off. Let's think of an example. Split view, the master of a split view. When you first bring up your iPad user interface, it's in portrait. You don't see the master. You have to kind of slide it out to see the master. You only see the detail, right? So it's not visible. You rotate to landscape, now the master becomes visible. So you're going to get view will appear. You rotate back to portrait, it's off screen. You rotate back to landscape, it's going to appear again. It's going to send you view will appear again. So you're going to get view will appear every time it appears on screen. Okay? Now what would you do when a view will appear? A lot of times, maybe if you have to do something very expensive, like let's say you have to go out to the network to get something, an image or something like that. You might not want to do that in view.did_load because maybe the user never turns you to landscape and never looks at your master. Maybe you've got an app where the detail is all that matters and people rarely pull out the master. Well, you wouldn't want to do that expensive thing until the master actually appeared. Now, you're going to want to do that expensive thing in another thread. We'll talk about that on Wednesday. To keep the main thread active. And of course, when that master appeared, if you're waiting for something on the network, there's going to be like a blank space or something that will fill in later. Maybe you put a spinning wheel, things like that. But view will appear, since you know you're actually going to get on screen, is a place where you might kick off something that's a little bit expensive. Also, your geometry is set here. Okay, by the time you get view will appear, your bounds, your views bound, you're a view controller, right? So your views bound, view.bounds, is set. So you can do geometry stuff here. It's legal, and you might want to, okay? But I'm going to show you another place you can do that as well on the next slide, or a couple slides. There's also a view did appear in addition to view will appear, okay? So view did appear gets sent to you after you are now on screen. You are visible now, okay? Pretty straightforward. And similarly, there's view will disappear. So you're just about to be taken off screen. Again, you're the split view master. In landscape, the person rotates to portrait. You're going to get view will disappear because you're going to disappear. It's just going to show only the detail. Okay? Here you might clean up some stuff. You might get rid of some resources that are expensive, like a big image or something that you can reconstitute fairly quickly, maybe from disk or something. That's the kind of thing you'll do in view will disappear. And of course, there's a did version of this too. View did disappear. Okay? So that will disappear and will appear and will disappear, and they're dids. Okay? Now let's talk about geometry. So when your geometry changes, when your bounds change, the system knows that your bounds changed, and it knows that you probably have to relay out your user interface. Okay? Now, 99% of the time, that's going to happen by magic because you've set up your auto layout properly, right? So you don't even have to do anything. But if for some reason you wanted to do something, you can override one of these two methods, view will layout subviews and view did layout subviews. So the system calls view will layout subviews anytime it wants to make sure that your views are properly laid out. Now, when it calls this is not views bounds did change. That's not the name of this method. Okay, it's view will layout subviews. So your subviews can be laid out for lots of different reasons. Maybe one of your subviews changes in a way that causes it to change shape and has to be relayed out, etc. So view will layout subviews is sent to you when someone inside your view hierarchy or your top level bounds change in a way where the system needs you to lay out your subviews. Okay, now you can make this happen by calling, just like you have set needs display, you can say set needs layout. If you say set needs layout, then the next pass around the event loop, the system will relay out your subviews. Okay? Now this can be called quite often, this view will and did layout subviews, because the changes are being made all the time and the system doesn't always quite know whether that affected your subview. So it might ask you to just lay them out again. Okay? So don't be surprised when you get view will layout subviews 2 or 3 times when the bounds only changed once, let's say. Okay? And you have to, if you're going to do something in these 2 methods, you have to do the right thing, even if like your bounds don't actually change. These things, this whole process of laying out your subviews, the idea is to make sure that your subviews are properly laid out. Now again, most of that's happening with auto layout. And the auto layout happens between these 2 methods. So you get view will layout subviews, you do whatever you want to do, then auto layout happens, then you get view did layout subviews. Okay, so your subviews might have moved around between the 2 calls of these. Make sense? Any questions about that? So, yeah, so these things might be called quite a lot, and we'll see that in the demo, that they might get called and called and called. Auto rotation, really you want to think of auto rotation primarily as just your bounds changed. So auto rotation is really a non-event, as we've seen in all of our apps that we've been writing so far. We don't even think about auto rotation. It just happens. Our bounds change. Auto layout works. The world is good. And that's the way you should think of it 99% of the time. But if for some reason you care about the actual case where rotation is happening, in other words, your device got turned and so the bounds got to be wider than tall when they used to be taller than wide, then you can participate. By the way, first line there says you can go to your project settings and prevent certain auto rotation from happening. And the default, by the way, is that portrait upside down is prevented. That's why you've noticed your app, you go in the simulator and you rotate it to landscape and then you rotate it again to upside down and it doesn't auto rotate. That's because in your project setting you said, oh, portrait upside down is not a supported orientation. So when you go to portrait upside down, it just does not auto rotate. And you can flip those 4 switches for the landscapes and portraits any way you want. Okay? It depends on your UI and what makes sense. Some UIs make no sense in landscape. Some only make sense in landscape. There might be a game or something that just doesn't make sense in portrait. Okay? But if you want to participate in the auto rotation, okay, like you want to do some animation of your own, because you notice that the rotation is animated, right? It goes from portrait to landscape. It kind of moves the views around. It's hard to see because it's happening so fast, but it is animating it. And you can actually participate that by this method view will transition to size, which is part of its part of the life cycle. And this transition coordinator you get, and I'm not going to talk about how to implement this. I haven't even talked about animation. I'm not going to talk about that for a couple weeks. But there is a method in that coordinator, for example, called animate alongside. And you can specify what kind of animations you want to animate alongside the rotation. So I'm just telling you this now because it's part of the view controller lifecycle, and you should just know in your head that it exists. Okay? It's a little bit of a complicated thing to use because when you rotate and you change bounds, really it's container views that are most concerned with that, like a split view. It needs to now put both things on screen and put a line, and when you switch the other way, so it's really about container views. A little less than about leaf view controllers. But a leaf view controller might want to know what's going on. All right, and then low memory, you get this did receive memory warning. Here you want to throw away anything in the heap that's easy to reconstitute. The way you throw things out of the heap, by the way, is you just set all pointers that you have to them to nil. Okay? If you're not pointing to something, then it won't stay in the heap. It gets thrown out. That does not include weak pointers. If you have a weak pointer to something, it still gets thrown out. Okay? If the only pointer in the world to an image in the heap is a weak pointer, it's going to get pitched, and that weak pointer is going to get set to nil. Okay? As we talked about when we were talking about delegation. Okay? That's the definition of a weak pointer. Okay, so in low memory situations, try to clean up. You'll almost never get this. You may never ever get this. If your app is very highly image intensive, maybe it's an image processing app and you got a lot of images in there, then it's possible, I suppose, but it's extremely unlikely. Okay, a lot of memory in these devices. Okay, now I'm going to go back to awake from nib, which is not really part of the view controller lifecycle, but a view controller, just like any other NS object subclass that comes out of a storyboard, will get awake from nib. And there are some students in this class in the past that have kind of abused awake from nib, and they just start trying to put everything in their initialization into awake from nib instead of putting it into view did load or view will appear or view will layout subviews, depending on what kind of thing it is. And I'm just warning you here, don't abuse awake from nib. But there are some cases where awake from nib is necessary. For example, if you want to set yourself as the delegate of the split view controller you're in, awake from nib is a good place to do that, because then it happens really early, and you'll start getting those delegate methods from split view as you go through the rest of your life cycle. Okay? So there are some times when awake from nib is good. All right, so here's the summary of the life cycle. You get instantiated, usually from a storyboard. You're going to get awake from nib. Segue prep is going to happen. Your outlets are going to get set by the system. View did load is going to get called. View will appear and disappear is going to happen as your view controller goes on and off screen. And as your view controller's geometry changes or the subviews change in a way that needs to be relayed out, you're going to get will layout subviews, then auto layout, then did layout subviews. So that could happen many times. And if you get low in memory, you can have this memory warning. Okay, so that's the view controller lifecycle. There is actually one other one in here. It will tell you when your size class changes, okay? But I haven't talked about size class yet, so I didn't put that in this list. But there's one more in there, will transition to traits or something like that, okay? All right, so I'm going to do a quick demo here, super fast. Let me get something to drink here. Okay. So I'm going to do a quick demo, and all I did is I took Psychologist from last time, and I just put a bunch of printlns in all these view controller lifecycle methods, okay, so that it would just print out where it is in the lifecycle all the time. So let's go do that. Let's go run that. It is here in Developer, Psychologist Lecture 8. Here we go. So you can see that in view will appear. I put a little log for that, disappear, all these. So I'm just basically logging all the things that are happening. Okay? So let's go. I'm going to run this on iPad. It's a little easier to make things happen here. All right. So here's our Psychologist. I haven't changed anything about the app. I'm going to make the console really big so that we can see what's going on here. All right. So notice we came up. The detail is the only thing. The detail is happiness view controller. It's the only thing visible. So what happened here? The Psychologist got pulled out of the storyboard. The happiness got pulled out of the storyboard. This 0 is which instance of it, because we're going to have multiple instances eventually. Then happiness got awake from nib. Then Psychologist got awake from nib. The order of awake from nib is completely not determinable, so you should not depend on it. Then the master got view did load. Even though the master never appears on screen, it still had its outlet set and got view did load sent to it. Then, interestingly, the master was asked to lay itself out, to lay its subviews out. Okay, again, it hasn't appeared. It hasn't even gotten view will appear, because it's not going to appear. But its subviews, want to get laid out. And why has this happened? The system might be preparing to animate it on screen or something. It just wants to make sure. This is not doing any drawing. This is just making sure the subviews are properly laid out. It happens twice here, maybe a before and after animation. Who knows what's going on here? It doesn't really matter. The size didn't actually change. Okay, the bound size didn't actually change. So this second one probably did almost nothing here. Then the detail, happiness, it gets a view did load, and then it gets a view will appear, because it's going to appear on screen. The animated is false because it doesn't animate on screen. It was the initial thing that shows up on screen, so boom, it just pops up there. It gets laid out, and then it gets view did appear, and here it is. Okay? Everyone understand that? Now I'm going to rotate to landscape, and that's going to cause the master to appear. So watch this. So we do rotate, all these dash, that's what happened since I rotated here. And you can see Psychologist and happiness both got informed that this transition to size was going to happen. So they could have participated in the animation if they want. You're going to see the animation happening a little bit down the road here. The master got another chance to lay its subviews out in a little different size, because this size, it's only 768 high instead of the full 1024, and it's a little wider too. So it got laid out. Then it got view will appear. So this guy was told it would appear. Okay? And this guy didn't get any view will appear because it's already there. So it's not appearing. It was already there before. So it gets view will appear. Now the detail gets a chance to lay its subviews out here at a new size, because it used to be the whole screen. Now it's just this part right here. So it got a new layout. And then the master was asked to lay out its subviews again. So you see how I'm saying this gets called a lot. So you just need to make sure that if you're doing anything in these two methods, that it's okay to be doing it over and over. Here's where the actual animation happens. And you can see that both the psychologist and the happiness have been invited to animate alongside if they wanted to. Then the master is asked to lay out one more time, same size. It's the third time it's been asked to do that. And then the master gets view did appear. Okay? Now the last thing I'm going to do is click one of these, which is going to cause a segue, which is going to cause this to be replaced. So let's do that. So we'll try the dancing tree here. Okay? So what happened here? A new happiness, happiness 1, got instantiated here. Okay, we got happiness 0 up here and happiness 1. It got awakened, it got prepared with happiness of 100. Okay, then layout subviews in the master again. Then the happiness 0 got view will disappear. Happiness 0, that old happiness, of course, getting pulled out and replaced by the new one, so it got view will disappear. Then the master got laid out again. And then view did load happened on happiness 1, the new happiness disappearing. Then it got view will appear, because it's going to appear. Then it got a chance to be laid out. The old happiness disappeared. The new happiness appeared. And then the old happiness got deinitialized, thrown out of the heap. Because like I said, once you segue away from it, boom, it's gone. Okay? So that's all I wanted to cover there. Everybody cool with that? Any questions about that view controller lifecycle? It's pretty straightforward, but you can already probably imagine in your head some things that you were doing in your code that's like, oh, I wish I had view did load. I really could have initialized some stuff there a little simpler. All right, so let's go back to our slides. All right, so you've seen a lot of auto layout already in this class, so I'm going to review briefly the things you should know. One is you know about using the dash lines. Okay, using the blue dash lines is helping interface builder. By the way, when I refer to interface builder, that means Xcode, the storyboard part of Xcode. We call that interface builder for historical reasons. So when you're in the storyboard Xcode, the dash lines are kind of telling Xcode what you want, what you intend as best you can. Okay? Then you know about control dragging between views to create relationships, right? Like spacing and hook this to the left edge and stuff like that. You know about those in the lower right corner, the pin and arranged popovers down there that let you do things like set all the things to equal widths or create spacing between all of them or line up their left edges, okay? You know about using reset to suggested constraints. If you use the blue lines, sometimes you'll do reset to suggested constraints and it will actually figure out what you want. I'd say only 50% of the time, but it's worth a try sometimes. The document outline, you know that on the left in the document outline, all your constraints are listed there. Okay? And also that's where if you've got problems, you can click on the little red or yellow button in the upper right-hand corner of the document outline, and it'll tell you. It might even suggest some ways to fix things, possibly. And it certainly will tell you anything that's misplaced. And you know from there you can also fix your misplaced views by clicking on the little triangles in there. You know about the size inspector. If you inspect a view in your storyboard and you look at the size inspector, you'll see all the constraints listed there. And in there, all the constraints are shown with their details. Okay? What the constants are and all that stuff is listed there. And of course, you can edit the constraints there. You can also, you know that you can click on a constraint and bring up the attributes inspector. And now you can inspect the constraint directly. Okay? It will be the thing that's selected, so the attributes inspector will let you set its attributes. Okay? So you know a lot here about Autola, and that is basically what Autola is. It's those things. Okay? Now again, as I've said many times, mastering Autola requires experience. You've got to know how to use all these tools to greatest effect. Okay, you got to familiarize yourself with what things can I align to things, what things can I pin to here and there, what things can I set as my constants that make sense. You got to learn all that by doing. Okay, I could spend many days going through every possible one. Okay, auto layout can be done in code. There are objects, classes in iOS that represent what's going on in auto layout, and in the demo I'm going to actually show you an example of doing that so you get an idea of what it looks like. But we rarely do that. If we can do it in the storyboard, we do it there. We only revert to doing it in code when it's like, we just can't express that somehow in the storyboard, which is extremely rare. But I'll show you a case where that's true. But all right, so what about rotation? As I said, when you have rotation, you're just going to rely on your auto layout to do that. But occasionally, when you rotate, things have changed so drastically in terms of the shape that auto layout just can't do it. It can't move a view where you want. So what's an example of that? Let's consider our calculator. Okay, let's say we had 20 buttons in our calculator. Okay, now in landscape, I might want them to be 5 buttons across and 4 down. But when I switch to portrait, now I might want 4 across and 5 down. Okay? There's no way you're going to write auto layout to do that. Auto layout cannot make such a huge change like doing that. Okay? So how do we deal with that? We still want to do that, so how do we do it? It's not just in the case of rotation where this is happening too. It also happens, for example, in a split view. Right? When you have the master in a split view on the left, it kind of is tall and thin, just like it was on an iPhone. Even though it's on an iPad, it's kind of in a space that's shaped more like an iPhone, right? Lots of vertical space, but not much horizontal space. So it's not just rotation where we care about this size business, the relative size of things. So the solution to this is called size classes. And so your view controller always exists in a size class environment for width and height. And currently the size class can either be compact or regular. Regular just means it's not compact, okay? And so let's try and understand when you're in these different situations. So for example, the iPhone 6 Plus is an interesting device. In portrait, its width is compact, its height is regular. Okay, so that's if you had like a full screen view controller on an iPhone 6 Plus. When you go to landscape on the 6 Plus, now it's compact in height and regular in width. Does that make sense? Right? It kind of makes perfect sense in that one. But the iPhone is kind of an interesting one. Other iPhones besides the iPhone 6 Plus. In portrait, it is compact in width and regular in height, just like an iPhone 6 Plus. But in landscaped, it's considered compact in width and compact in height. And that might seem non-intuitive, but it just turns out that a non-iPhone 6 Plus, the width of it is just not quite enough to say this is a regular width. Most UIs just will look better if you consider it compact. Okay? Now the iPad is always regular in both directions. Portrait or landscape, it's always so big that it's just regular in both directions. There's no compact on the iPad. But again, a particular view controller on an iPad, like the master of a split view side by side, that's going to be compact. Regular height, compact width. All right? This whole thing is extensible. It's not kind of all frozen in stone. If you have a view controller, you can find out your size class by using this property called trait collection. And inside trait collection is going to return the horizontal size class and the vertical size class. And that's just an enum that's either .compact or .regular. Okay, now you probably almost never need to do this because you're going to edit this in your storyboard. Okay? You're going to set up your storyboard to deal with size classes, and then your code, it's just all going to work. Okay? As long as you got the rest of your auto layout going. So how does that work? All right, so here's the size classes, right? Horizontal and vertical, compact and regular. See these 4 boxes, right? That's every possible combination. Okay? And so for my calculator, for example, here's what my UI might look like in those situations. Okay? You see here that I've gone 5 across and 4 down when I have a compact height and a regular width. But basically any time I have a regular width, I'm going to go, what did I do? Every time I have a regular height, I go 5 high. Okay, so lower right is regular height, it's 5 high. Lower left is regular height, it's 5 high. The top two are compact height, I've gone to 4 high, 5 wide. Okay? So it'd be kind of a pain, though, if I had to do all 4 of these for every user interface I build. So we actually have another size class called any. And if you throw any into the mix, now I can do this exactly the way I just said, which is any, in any circle. First of all, I'm going to have an any, which is the middle, and that's going to be my base UI. So if I don't specify any particular size class, it's going to look like that, which is 4 across and 5 down. But in the case where it's vertically compact, I'm going to go to 5 across and only 4 high, and I don't care what the width is, so that's why it's any. So now I only have to do 2 user interfaces. My main user interface, the any, and one other one, which is I'm in a compact vertical situation, so I want to go 4 high. Okay, so this makes it a little easier. Now I only have to do 2 things, and still covers all the same bases as the previous slide. And incredibly, the Interface Builder will have a graph that looks almost exactly like this slide that lets you pick between these various boxes, and you can design your user interface in any of these boxes. Okay? And it'll just magically work. So let's take a look at a demo here. I actually have a couple of demos. One is called Show Size class. It's just an app that I wrote that shows the size class of whatever device you're on at the time. Okay? And we're going to take a look at the code for that. And then I'm going to do an app from scratch, which is called Auto Layout. That's the name of my app. And it's just going to have some very interesting auto layout things, including a size class problem that we're going to have to solve. Okay? So it's kind of kitchen sink of that. All right. Let's go and look at this app I wrote called Show Size class. So here's Show Size class, and I'm just going to run this on some various devices. So let's run this on an iPhone 6 Plus, for example. Here's an iPhone 6 Plus. How do I make this small? And I guess I can't. This is as small as I can make it. And you see how iPhone 6 Plus in portrait here is horizontally compact, and it's regular vertically. That's what the green means. Okay? If I rotate it, it's regular horizontally and compact vertically. Everybody cool with that? All right, now let's look on the iPhone 6. All right, iPhone 6, again, regular vertically, compact width, but if we rotate, it's compact in both directions. Okay? Let's go to like iPhone 4S or something like that. Okay, here's 4S. It's also, even though it's kind of short, it's still considered regular vertically and compact this way, and compact in both directions, just like an iPhone 6. Okay, and lastly, let's take a quick look at iPad 2, or any iPad. I do iPad 2 because it fits on this screen. All the rest of them are too high resolution again. All right, look, see, it's regular this way and regular both ways this way. Okay, so let's look at the app that I wrote to do that. I'm going to keep going back here to iPhone 6. Okay, let's look at the app that I wrote. Here it is, Show Size class. It has a storyboard here. Here's its storyboard. Let's see if we can find anything in the storyboard. There it is. Okay. Interesting. This storyboard, there's no arrows. There's the dot in the middle, but where the heck are those arrows? Oh, I must draw them in my code. Let's look at the view control. Oh, my view control had no code. This app has no code. How is it possible that it drew those arrows? Okay. Well, the answer is that those arrows are only drawn for the size class in question. So, for example, if I have something that is horizontally compact, I draw those 2 red arrows. And where is that? Well, look down at the bottom of the screen here. It says any. So this is the user interface if you're in any, the default user interface. Okay? If I click on this right here, I can pick any of those 9 boxes that I showed on that slide. So for example, look at this box right here. This is any width, but a compact height. Now when I click here, it's actually going to change my user interface and show me what the user interface looks like on a device that is any width but a compact height. See, these are just two labels I threw out here that do that. And same thing, let's say over here, any height, compact width. Okay? Or over here, we have regular width, any height. Bloop. And over here, we have any width, regular height. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so that's it. That's my entire user interface. I just put the arrows in the, whichever size class was appropriate there. Okay? So this is really cool to be able to go here and basically edit your user interface in any of these circumstances, including specific ones like this compact width, compact height. That's basically you're editing your user interface for non-iPhone 6 Pluses in landscape, because that's the only one that has both compact width and compact height. Okay? So you could actually have a specific one just for that circumstance. Okay? But it's nicer to have these any's, to use these any's out here so that they'll work, and we'll see in the demo. And one of the things I challenged, I didn't really talk about in the slides there, but I challenge you to do is to go back. I actually added this as an extra credit to the homework number 3 if you want. Go back and make your calculator user interface look different in different size classes. Maybe do 5 buttons by 4 instead of 4 by 5, okay? Or something like that. Or even in some ones have more buttons. Like if you look at the calculator that Apple ships on the iPhone, when you go to landscape, it has a lot more operations. The buttons are all smaller, but it has a lot of operations that aren't even there. And you can do that with size classes as well. Okay? All right, so now we're going to write an app here from scratch. And it is going to look like this. Okay? Here's what its UI is going to look like. It's this is demos, okay? So it's a very simple app. It asks for a username and password up here. So I have Mad Bum, and password is foo. Now I can change the security on my password. I can have it be secured so I can't see it. Okay? But when I log in, it's going to show me an icon for the person's name, and what company they work for. Okay? Madison Bumgarner in this case. And if I rotate, it's going to say the same information, but notice that this is not below here. It's actually moved to be beside it. Okay? So basically, on size classes that are regular height, where I have a lot of room, I put the words at the bottom. Try to use this space to show their picture more. And the other size classes, I put it off to the side. Okay? And we have other users here, like Hennessy, same password. Okay? He's got a little different icon, or old J. Apple. Okay, John Appleseed. Okay? In all of these cases, it's going to do that. Okay? So a lot of going on here to make this work with auto layout, right? You got this thing automatically changing right here. You've got this image here which you want to be the right aspect ratio. We got the size class thing so we can put the words underneath when it's tall, etc. Okay? So that's what we're going to build. All right, let's go, and we're going to start from scratch, as I like to do usually. So let's create a new Xcode project, iOS application. I'm going to call it Auto Layout. Okay, I'm going to put it the same place I put all my apps there. Here it is. I'm going to move this app delegate out of the way and the launch screen out of the way. For the first time, we're actually going to talk about these image assets here today. It's a good opportunity to talk about that. Okay, and in my controller, I'm going to clear out this code. Don't need any of that. By the way, the things that I cleared out here, you starting to recognize them? View controller lifecycle methods. Okay? But if I need those, I'll put them back. But okay. So let's go to our storyboard and start building this UI. And this is going to be a lot of clicking things around. I'm going to make this as big as possible for us here. Sorry. Put that there. A lot of graphical things happening. So let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to start with those text fields at the top, right? I need a username and password text field. So I'm going to go down here and grab a text field. Okay, this is actually going to be an editable one. So I grab this one text, not label, but text. And I'm going to put it up in the upper corner to start. Grab another one. Put this here. Okay. Now, I'm going to use some auto layout stuff you already know about. I'm going to use control drag. Let's stick this one trailing space to that edge. Let's stick this one with its trailing space to that end. Let's stick this one to the top. Let's put a space in between, the vertical space between them. You know about doing all those kind of things. Now, one thing, as I'm working with auto layout, I often like to click this little button right here, because this will give you a little summary of what's going on. And when all it's complaining about is that frames are going to be moved, a cool thing you can do is go down here to this button, the same one where we do reset to suggested constraints and clear constraints. There's this update frames, and it will update all frames in your storyboard. Now, it made those smaller because the text in them is small, but no worry about that. We're going to fix that later. So I did undo right there because I wanted them to be a little bigger just as I work. Okay, but I'll be going back to look at this often. And if I see it's just frames, then I'll be doing update frames. And if I don't like what it did, I can always undo. Keep going. All right, so let's go and do our things here for the username and password fields. So I'm just going to put some text in these, password, username. So these ones I kind of want to be on the left, okay, if you remember. So I'm going to do the same thing here with control drag. Set that leading space. Let's set that leading space. Let's set this thing to the, actually I'm not even going to set this to the top. Now, this is an interesting one. So I have these two guys right here. Really what I want them to do is be lined up with whatever the text is in here. I want to line them up by their baselines. So I'm going to control drag between the two of them and go down here and pick baseline. So this is going to line up their baselines. Okay? Same thing here. Drag this one and line up their baselines there. Now another thing I want is that I want them to be kind of, well, I want these two guys, username and password, to be the same width. So I'm control dragging between them and saying equal widths. You remember in the calculator we did the equal widths down here with this thing, okay? But you can do it with control drag as well. And then also I want these things attached. So I want that thing attached to each other so that its horizontal spacing is set. And I want this thing attached to this, its horizontal spacing. Now, I've done all this stuff even though they're really not where I want them right now. So usually you can kind of set things up and then just go into the size inspector and inspect all of them and get rid of every magic number you see. If you get rid of every magic number you see, usually it's going to do exactly what you want. So let's go here. Let's start with this one. Let's find some magic numbers. Look at this. Leading space username, magic number. Okay, a magic number means any number in here. Anything that's a number, get rid of it. So 392, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to do it by going up here. And instead of having 392, I'm going to pick standard value. Okay? So now it's gone. So you can click on these things and click edit to get rid of these. Even 8, which it got by the blue lines, okay, I don't like that either. I'm just going to go here and say 0 because I want that to be right up against the edge. Okay? Oops, sorry. Same thing. Oh, was that? Did I do the right thing there? Leading space to username. Yeah, trailing space to super. You're right. How about this one? Top space to top layout right here. I'll use the standard value for that. Okay? Oops, sorry, keep clicking there. And then here, align baseline equals 3. Okay, I want these baselines exactly aligned, not 3 off of each other. So I'm going to say 0 right here. So I've gotten rid of all the magic numbers in here. Okay, now let's do it for this one. Okay, this one also has a magic number here. Let's change that to be standard value. We got this one, align baseline. We want that to be 0. Okay, so we got rid of that. How about this one? Oh, this one's good. No magic value. And this one, also good. Okay, all is good. All is well with the world. Okay, but we still have this up here. Frame will be different at runtime. So I'm going to go down here and update our frames. And this looks good. Now, when I look at this, I'm like, that's really not what I want. So I must have made a mistake. For example, I want this spacing in between not to be 0. So I typed 0 somewhere where I wanted a standard value. So let's go back here and see where that is. Okay, it looks like it's this one. You can tell by how, when you mouse over these, it tells you. So here, let's go back to here. Instead of 0, let's say standard value. Okay, and it moved it there for us. Sometimes it moves it, sometimes you need to do update frames. It just kind of depends on the character of the change you're making. Okay? Now, here's a really cool thing. I want to see what this looks like in portrait and landscape. So yeah, I could go up here and hit run, but there's a lot faster way, which is to open up the assistant editor here, and instead of showing your view controller, go up here and go down to preview. This will preview your UI. Okay? And you can preview it in either landscape or portrait. You can also preview it on other devices, like maybe an iPhone 6 Plus, okay, which is kind of so big that you can't really, barely even see it here. Barely flip it around, okay? Or you could even look at it on an iPad if you wanted, okay? I think 4 inches works best for this small resolution I have. But this is really cool. Now, this can only preview your UI for things that aren't running your code. Okay, so if you're going to do something that you need to run your code, then you need to go run the app. But if you just want to see how is the auto layout going to work, you can do this. Now, another thing that's cool here is, what's this going to look like when you give it off to your localization guys and this gets translated to German or something like that? And you can do that. You can kind of make sure that you don't have any big problems by going down here. See where it says English? So I click on that, and we can go to this double-length pseudo language. And all that does is doubles every text. Okay, so even a long translation of the word username would fit there. And my auto layout is working properly, and so my translation is just going to work. So auto layout is not just used for landscape versus portrait or whatever. It can be used for translation as well. When you're localizing things, you want auto layout to make things fit. Okay? Everyone understand that? Okay? All right, good. So we're making progress here. Let's go. By the way, you probably don't want to have preview open as you're doing a lot of changes here because it can be constantly previewing in real time. So if you've got a really powerful machine, it could keep up, but you might be asking it to do a lot of calculations. So I usually close that while I'm working and then just bring it back whenever I want to preview. So let's do those 2 buttons. Remember, I had the button change security, which changed this to secure, and then I had the button login. So let's go ahead and do that. Another trick I'm going to show you is, I'm always scrolling around in here trying to find things. You can actually find things real quick by going down to the bottom here and typing like button. Now it's only going to show you the buttons. Okay, so we got bar button, and here's regular button. So I'm going to drag that out. Let's get a couple of those buttons. We'll call this one change security. We'll call this one login. Okay, now where do these want to be? They kind of want to be underneath there, something like that. Definitely I like their baselines lined up right there. So let's go ahead and kind of put those in position. I'm going to set the vertical spacing between the login and this guy right here. And then I'm control dragging here to set the baselines the same. Okay? Now, that has actually set the vertical position of both of these things. Okay? Because the vertical position of these are set, and so when I tied this vertical position here and the baselines, which is a vertical positioning here, but if I go up here, it says the horizontal position of login and change security is ambiguous, which makes sense. Okay, I haven't really specified where these things are supposed to be. Just because I put them on screen doesn't mean that there's an auto layout rule. Now, what do I want it to be? Well, I kind of want them to be some reasonable distance apart so it doesn't look like, this is part of the same thing. That would look like change security login is one thing. So I want them apart a little bit. But otherwise, I want them centered on the screen. I want the pair of them centered. Now, there's no auto layout rule that says that. That's too complicated, okay? But I can easily do this with a little creativity. And when you start doing auto layout, you start realizing, how can I do that? Well, I need to be creative in how I'm going to approach this. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 2 little spacer views on the side here, and I'm going to set them to be the same width. And you see how that's going to make it so these 2 kind of get pushed into the middle, right, by the same amount on each side. So how would I do that? So I'm going to do that by just grabbing some views, just generic views, okay? This is just a generic view like the one you do to do your graph view or the face view or whatever. When I'm working on it here, I'm going to give it some background color so I can see the thing, okay? Now, when I actually ready to go, I will turn that back off. And I'm just going to put them in here somewhere. copy and paste another one, put it over here somewhere. And then I'm just going to wire these up to how I want them. So I want this to kind of be on that edge. I want this thing to be on that edge. I want these two things to kind of be linked. Okay? Let's say I'll link their horizontal spacing. Now here I'm going to set multiple things between these two. I'm going to set the horizontal spacing, and then notice I'm holding down Shift. I'm also going to set the top and bottom of this view to match the top and bottom. Now there's no baselines because this is not text, this is just a generic view. So I'm going to line up the top and bottom. So I can do Shift-click to do that. Okay? And then same thing over here. I'm going to do the same thing with these two guys. I'm going to set the top, whoops, sorry, Control, drag. I'm going to set the top and bottom and the horizontal spacing. Okay? Then I said I wanted to make this one and this one be equal widths. So I can just do that with Control drag as well. So I've set that up. I want this to be stuck to this edge, trailing space. I want this to be stuck to this edge, leading space. And I want these two guys to have some horizontal spacing. I'm not quite sure how much I want yet, but I want some sort of horizontal spacing. Now, I've done this, and look, the yellow thing went away. It says, okay, I know exactly where to put these things. But this is really not where I want these put. Okay? Because I actually want this spacer right up against this, and I want this spacer right up against this. So I'm going to go through that same process again of getting rid of the magic number. So let's start with this guy and get rid of his magic numbers in the size inspector. So it's got this trailing space here. Let's get rid of that. We want that to be a standard value. Okay? We got this one. We align the bottoms. We want those to be exactly aligned, so we'll do 0. Same thing the top. We want that exactly aligned. So I got rid of all of the magic numbers for this. How about this guy? Same thing. Okay? We want this to be standard value. Usually, I always put it to standard value. Unless standard value is not an option, then I usually pick 0. Okay? If standard value is not an option, I'll just make it 0. Then here, align top. Let's see, standard value. Nope, let's make it 0. Okay? So, no magic numbers there. How about this guy? Does he have magic numbers? Yeah, he has this 87. That's this difference between these two. And that's okay. This has a magic number here. This. Oops. Hello. Standard value. Okay, so no, the only magic number we have is this 87, which is this distance here. Now what's really cool about this is you can double click on this and inspect it right in space. So here I'm going to make it be, let's say, 50. So this is a magic number right here because there's really no standard spacing because I'm kind of doing somewhat of a non-standard thing here. Anytime you do a non-standard thing, really ask yourself, do I really want to be doing this? Okay, because I'm kind of going against the grain by doing something against, you know, what standard values are. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and do it, but should probably be asking myself if I really want to do that. And it might be a little confusing to users. So let's go ahead and look at this thing in the preview again. So here it is. It looks good. See, it made those two things the same width. Put these things in the center. Same thing here. Put those in the center. Excellent. Okay, so that's good. Now I've got it where I want it, so I can go back and turn these things back to being non-gray. Okay, go back to the default. Okay, see how I built that UI? So those spacers, don't forget you can put spacers in. They're perfectly legal to throw in there. Question?
What's the canvas option? Instead of the standard value, you choose the canvas value?
Okay, yeah, when you have something selected, okay, and you go over here, and it says edit, and you can change to the canvas value. That says whatever is actually here right now. In other words, to what I moved it to, basically. That, and when you first control drag, that's the value it's going to have. Okay? Good question there. Okay, now let's start writing some code, okay? Because I want this change security button to change this to say secured password, and I want this to actually be a secured password in that case, okay? So what's that code going to look like? Let's go here to automatic. Here's our view controller here. I'm going to need some outlets to connect to these things, so I'm going to control drag some stuff here. Let's control drag that. That is our login field. Let's control drag this. That is our password field. And let's control drag over to this. That is our password label. Okay, so we got that. Now, let's say I'm going to do my view did load here. Okay, and when my view is loaded, I'm going to update my UI. Well, first of all, of course, I'm going to do super.viewDidLoad. Then I'm going to update my UI. I'm going to make this wider so this is not jumping out on you so much. And I'm going to have a private func here to update my UI. And all I'm going to do in my UI so far is I'm going to have that password field. I'm going to set its secure text entry to true. Or actually, I'm going to set it to secure. And I'm going to have a var for that. So let's have a var here called secure. It's going to be a Boolean. I shouldn't even need to say that. Let's say it's false, starts out false. And I'm going to do a did set here and update my UI every time it changes. And I'm going to allow this to be public. So people can set this Boolean secure. And what's the problem here? Oh, computer property must have, no, there's something wrong there. I don't know about that. Okay. I'm going to let people set this secure thing externally, and then that's going to change this to say secured password, and it's going to start securing it here. So we're going to do secure text entry. This is just a property in UI text field that you can set that just makes it so that when you type, you get the little dots instead of seeing what the person is typing. And then I'm also going to, in the password label, I'm going to set its text. If it's secure, I'm going to set it to be secured password. And if it's not secure, I'm going to set it to just be password. Okay, so that's this label right here. I'm going to change that label depending on whether it's secure or not. That make sense? All right, so let's go ahead and run, because now we need to run so that, because we're going to be executing our code here. And let's hope that when we click that button, our auto layout makes it so that everything kind of shifts over. And it doesn't, because we need to have a target action. Okay, let's do target action here. We want an action method. We'll call this toggle security. Don't need an argument there. Connect. Here's toggle security. And this is secure equals not secure. Okay, we're just going to toggle the security when this button is pressed. Okay, so change security. Looks good. And see how it moved these things? We had equal widths set on these. So when I change security, it makes these be equal widths, which moves everything else out of the way as necessary. And it works either way. Okay, everybody cool with that? All right, so next let's do login right here. Okay, so the login is really easy. I'm just going to go over here and control drag for target action. We'll call this login. It's an action. Oops. Sorry, got that wrong. Let's go here. Control drag. An action called login. We don't need the sender. Connect. Now, how am I going to do login? Well, I actually have a simple user class, which I'm going to drag into here. Here it is right here. User.swift. Okay, so I'm going to drag that into, oops, let's go here. Easiest way to do this. All right, so I'm just going to drag user.swift in here. I'm going to copy it. There we go. Okay, what does the user.swift look like? Looks like this. It's a model class. It has nothing to do with UI. It's just model class. And it just has name, company, login, and password. And it has a function, class function here that you can use to log in. And it has a little database of users like Madison Bumgarner. Okay? So that's all that's in there. Let's go use that now in our controller. So when I log in, I'm just going to set a logged in user. So I need some var, which is a logged in user. That's basically my model. Logged in user. It's going to be a user. And I'm going to do the did set. Actually, it's going to be a user optional. And I'm going to do my did set here and also update my UI. So if anyone changes my logged in user externally, I'll let this be public. Then I can update my UI. And so I'm going to say logged in user equals user.login. And I need to give it the login. that's this field right here. So I'm going to say login field.text. But this could be an optional, okay? And the user takes a string. So I'm going to say, okay, well, if it's nil, if the login field is nil, then just pass blank empty string. Okay? That's obviously not going to log into anything, but that's okay. And then same thing here, password field.text, and we'll have empty string there as well. Okay? So that's how we're going to log in, and we'll have a logged in user. Once we have our update UI here, actually we'll do that a little later. Okay, so that's it. Okay? So now we've got logged in. We've got this whole part of our user interface working right here. Now about the bottom part. The bottom we had an image, and we had the name of the person and the company they worked for. So let's do the image first. I'm just going to go over here and grab an image. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to type image. And this is a class, kind of like a UI label for images. It's called image view. I'm going to put this in the corner down here. I'm going to control drag. Leading space, control bag, bottom space. Now, you'd think, oh, I just set this here, it's ready to go, but when I click this little thing, it says, oh, the size and vertical position are ambiguous for image view. And that's because we don't have an image in here, so it doesn't know what size it is. Okay? So let's go put an image in here, and I got some images we can use right here. Okay? So I'm going to bring this image Stanford into my project. And this is the first time we've done this, and this is what this image.xc assets is for. This manages all the images in your app. So here's my app icon. I haven't set it to anything, so those are all blank. I'm going to drag this Stanford image in here, and it creates it. Now, notice this says 1x. So that means on low-resolution devices, this is the image it's going to use. And I could actually have a different image on a higher resolution device. Like maybe on a high resolution device, I could do this one with the Stanford tree. I have more resolution so I can draw this little tree a little better. Okay? And on a really high-res device, like maybe iPhone 6 Plus, I could put even higher resolution image in there. So you can manage that. You can also manage other things about the images. I'm not really going to go into this, but you can manage them by size class. Okay? This image appears on compact or regular or whatever. Also, it has vector graphics in addition to bitmaps. It's a really powerful system for managing all of your image assets here. Now, while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and drag some of these other images I have in here as well, because we'll need those later. Okay, here's all my images I have down here. Okay, so I have an image. So how do I set the image of this little thing in my storyboard? Well, I just inspect this image view and go here, and all the images I just loaded are going to be here. So I'm going to pick Stanford. Okay, so now that I've given it an image, look. No problems. It just says the frame is wrong. So no problem. Let's fix the frame. Oops. Here. Update frames. Oh. Ooh, that's no good. Okay. So we have a big image there. It smashes on top of the other thing. So how are we going to fix that? Well, a simple way to do that would just be to control drag between these two and set the vertical spacing. Okay. And then I can even double click this and make this vertical spacing be a standard value. Okay, now let's go ahead and update frames, and it doesn't smash into the ones on top. Okay, simple solution there. But we still have this right here. 8 views are vertically ambiguous. Oh my gosh, what did I do? It looks perfect to me. Why is it saying that? Well, when you get this kind of thing, it's time to go back to our old friend, the document outline here. Okay, let's make some more space. In the document outline, we can click on this thing in the corner here and look at all these problems we have. Okay, you can see that it's all these vertical things here, understandably. And look what it keeps suggesting. Oh, set the vertical compression resistance priority. Set the vertical hugging. What the heck is compression resistance priority and vertical hugging? What the heck is that? Okay, that has to do with this user interface is going to be expanding and compressing vertically. And when it does, who gets the extra space? And when it compresses down, who allows themselves to be compressed and who can't compress? Okay? That's what this hugging and compression resistance is about. So here we've got these guys are all lined up. This, okay, these two guys and this button, they cannot be compressed. If they get compressed, their text is going to get squished down. So we do not want them compressed. But this guy, he could be compressed because it's an image. It could just redraw itself at a shorter height. So I need to set the resistance to being compressed for this guy to be lower. He's got lower resistance to being compressed. So how do I do that? We do that in the size inspector. If you select something, you'll see down here at the bottom, content hugging priority and content compression resistance priority. Okay, now these are priorities. These are just arbitrary numbers. Right now, this one is 750 in the vertical. This one is also 750. This one is 750. This one is 750. They all have the same priority to be compressed. That's why it's complaining. Okay, because it doesn't know which one to compress, because they're all the same. So we can just go back to this one and say, okay, well, we're going to lower this guy's compression resistance to 700. Oh, all my problems went away. Okay, now I have no yellow thing up here. This resolved everything. I had 8 things that were ambiguous. Now they're all fine. Why? Because when we compress now, we're going to know that this is the guy who gets compressed, and these guys don't. Okay, so that's what the compression thing. And we'll see hugging in a second and more compression a little later. Okay, so that's what these are about. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't understand these. But it's quite simple. It's just how much is this view compared to other views resisting being compressed, and hugging priority is how much does it want to be its size? How much does it want to be small, in other words? So like this guy, that button always wants to be only big enough to hold the log in. It does not want to be really tall or really wide. It wants to hug, so it has a high hugging priority. Other things, they might not care if they get bigger. Okay? Like this thing right here, it really wants to hug vertically. It doesn't mind if it gets stretched out horizontally, right? Okay, so that's that. Now let's go to, what are we going to do next here? Let's add a couple more fields. That name, remember we had the name and the company? Let's go add those and see what happens here. So those are going to be text fields, so they're labels rather. They're right here at the top. So I'm just going to put these out here, grab a couple of these. We'll make this one be name. We'll make this one be the company. All right, now, where do I want these to be located? Well, I kind of want this to be right here. I really want it to be kind of like right here. Okay, not perfectly in the middle because I'm going to put company right here. So now it would be kind of offset down. But I guess I could say, all right, I'll make these 2 things. I'll have their horizontal spacing and their center-wise matched up. The center is vertically. It's kind of not exactly what I want, but it's close. And then this guy, I will have his vertical spacing and his left edge lined up with the name, right? That's pretty much what I want. So that's not bad. But really, I don't want this lined up with the middle here. I want the bottom of this lined up with the middle. So how can I do that? Okay, pay attention now. It's very important to understand because now we're going to start looking at how these constraints work. So I'm going to click on this constraint, which causes me to inspect it here in the inspector. Okay, this is what a constraint looks like. Notice the constraint has 2 items, a first item and a second item. And for each item, it says something about that item, like its center, or its bottom, or its top. Okay? If it had text, it could be baselines. All right? So each of them has something like that. And then it has a relationship between them, which could be equal, less than or equal, or greater than or equal. So right now I have the center of this Stanford thing equal to the center of the name thing. But it's perfectly fine for me to say I want the center of the Stanford thing to match the bottom of the name thing. Okay? Understand that? And then down here you have this constant. Okay? The constants, there's 2 constants. One is a multiplier and one is a constant. Okay? So the constant is always added onto the end. And the multiplier is going to multiply the things that are being compared. So it really doesn't make sense too much to multiply, but it kind of does. Watch if I do 4-to-1 ratio. It's putting this, bottom of this, up 4 times, the ratio at 4-to-1 of the size of here. Okay? And this can also be like 0.5, okay, which is really tiny, so tiny that it's 1. Let's say 2. All right? So these can be numbers or they can be ratios. And then the constant is an amount added to it, like 50. Okay, so I've just added 50 pixels. So it's just always added. So constant is always added, multiplier is multiplied. All constraints are this way, every single one. Okay? And some make sense with center, top, bottom. Some of them make sense with width and height. And when we do one in code, you're going to see we're going to do width and height. You know, but they're still in this same form. They always have the same form. That's why there's only one constructor for these layout constraints in the code. Okay? And it just takes all of these things, the constant, the multiplier, the first item, which thing on the first item, the relationship, and the second item, the second, and the thing on that. Okay? So we're going to see that. So let's see if this worked. Just for fun, let's go ahead and go back to our code and wire these things up. Okay, so we'll control drag, sorry, from the name. Oops, undo. Okay, control drag from the name. That is our name label. And we'll go and control drag from the company here. That is our company label. All right, and in our update UI, sorry about the width here. Let's do this. In our update UI here, we are going to update those. So we'll just say that our name label .text equals our logged in user. And if our logged in user is nil, then we'll just set the text to be nil as well. So I'm using optional chaining there. But that's the name of the person. And then our company labels text equals the logged in user's company. Okay? Let's also set that image view right there. Okay, so we'll control drag from the image view. It's just like any other thing. I can control drag this thing over. So let's do that. I'm going to call it the image view. Okay. And we'll set that as well in our update UI here by saying image view dot image equals the logged in user's image. Unfortunately, this is not going to work. And why is this not going to work? Because image is not defined in user. If we go look at user, okay, user can't have an image because it's a model. It doesn't have any UI kit. There's no UI, and UI image is a UI thing. Okay, so we can't have any model. But that doesn't stop us from having an image property in user because we can use extensions. Okay, so here I'm going to make an extension to user. Okay, it's going to be a var called image. It's going to be a UI image. A UI image. But I'm adding this in my controller, so that's fine because it's extending my model, but it's not actually touching my model. My model is still purely fine. And to do this, I'm just going to return basically a UI image that is named the user's login. Now notice I can refer to login here because this is user. This is on user, so login is a user thing. So I can refer to that. Okay? But this is saying no because this might return nil. So I'm going to say if I can let the image equal that, then I will return it. Otherwise, I will return a UI image of some unknown user. I have a thing there I put in there called unknown user. That's just an image that I put there. So, oh yeah, and this, I'm going to make this optional so the whole thing can return optional. Okay? So now this is implemented. This might return nil, but that's okay because this is allowed to be nil and all is well. So let's go take a look. Now we should have our full UI functioning here. Let's go on our iPhone here. Oh, I know. Yeah, sorry. Here, right there. Okay, run. Okay, here it is. So let's log in as Mad Bum. And log in. And there we go. Oh, it looks terrible. What's going on here? Look at how it stretched this thing out. Okay, I want this hugging. I don't like this. This is not hugging, okay? But there's another problem too. We'll look at this in a second. But and let's look this way though. Same thing. It's no good. Okay, so we're getting close. Why is this happening? Well, the reason that this is happening is because we have all these things attached to each other, and so we can fix this in two ways actually. One way is I can go here and change this guy his hugging priority can just be less, so that these guys will be more likely to hug down on their text. So I'm going to set this guy's vertical hugging priority down to, let's say, 200. The rest of these are at, see, 250. Okay, these are all at 250. I'm going to set mine down to 200. Okay? So we run. Let's log in as MadBum again. There we go. Okay, so it didn't squish this, although, wow, now it stretched this thing way up. I don't really like that either. Okay, so why is that happening? Well, that's happening because of this constraint right here. This constraint says that the distance from the top of the image to the bottom of here has to equal the standard value. Equal. Well, I don't want equal. I'm going to say if it's greater than or equal, that's fine. Okay, so this is where you would use a greater than or equals, because this spacing, I just want to make sure it doesn't smash into it. But if it's smaller, that's okay. Don't mind that. All right, so now let's try MadBum. MadBum. Okay, perfect. So now it's doing that. And over here, whoops, over this way, working fine. Okay? So we're getting good. There's only really two things left that are problems in this whole thing. One is this guy getting smashed off. Got to fix that. And we fix that. You already know how to fix that. I'm just going to take this and make it so that this thing hooks to this edge. And same thing with this thing, hooking to this guy's edge. And again, I don't want them to be anything but a standard value here. So I'm going to have this one be 0. And same thing with this one right here. I don't like this non-standard values. In fact, I got a couple left over from previous things here. So let's fix these. Standard values. Okay. All right. Everything looked good there. No magic number. Oh, here's the magic number. Let's get rid of that. Standard value. Is that it? Okay. Got all those. Everything looks fine. It moved. So now we should be all fixed and ready to go. All right, MadBum again. Secure this time. Don't want you to know MadBum's password. Okay, looking good. Oh, it still didn't quite work. We got the name, but why did this thing not do that? Oh, what's going on there? San Francisco Giants got put up. Well, the reason there is this guy's hugging priority is too low. Okay, sorry, his compression resistance, I mean, is too low. He's allowing himself to be compressed. Okay, so here we need to have the horizontal compression resistance of this guy be higher. So I'm going to set it to 800. It doesn't really matter what we set as long as it's higher than the other things like this one, which is 750. So let's set this guy's also, his compression to 800. Okay, so that prevents them from being compressed down so that their text won't show. Oh, MadBum. Okay, oh, well, that's not so good. Okay, so we fixed one problem, we introduced another one. So there's two problems with this actually. One, this is not the right aspect ratio. This is not what the Giants logo looks like. You can barely even tell it's the Giants, okay? And number two is, it's way too small, okay? Look at all this empty space I got up here, okay? So we got two things to fix here, and then we're done. One is make this aspect ratio be enforced, and another one is put this in the right space in this size class, which is I got a lot of vertical space. So let's go ahead and fix the aspect ratio one first. You know, that one, we'd like to be able to just go here and add some kind of constraint, but we can't actually do that. And that's because if you remember, when we look at a constraint, this constant and multiplier are constants. And every time we get a new image, it has a different aspect ratio. Okay? So unless we wanted to force everyone's image to be the same aspect ratio, we need code to do this because we have to calculate that aspect ratio. So this is what that looks like. I'm going to go through this pretty fast because we're over time already. But so you can watch it here. So I'm going to do this like this. I'm going to create a new var, which is an aspect ratio constraint. And it's going to be of type NS layout constraint. This is the type of those constraints. All those constraints in there, it is of this type. Okay? Now I'm going to create another var called image, UI image. And it could be optional, it's fine. And it's just going to be a computed property where I'm going to get and set my image views property. So I'm really just going to return image view.image, and in the setter, I'm just going to set it. Let's go to wide here. Wide mode. Okay, in the setter, I'm just going to set it. ImageView.image equals image. Now, why am I creating this little computer property? Because every time I set my ImageView's image, I want to update this aspect ratio constraint. Okay? So if I can let this constrained view, this is the view I'm trying to constrain, which is the image view. If I can let it equal something, in other words, it's not nil. Okay? And if I can let the new image equal new value, because this is, we're setting an image here. So if I'm able to set an image in this constrained view, then I'm going to create this aspect ratio constraint equal to something. If I can't set the new image, then I'm going to set the aspect ratio constraint equal to nil. Okay? So if someone set my image to nil, I can't have a constraint. The aspect ratio of nil image is nothing, so I can't even have a constraint there. So how do I create this constraint in the case I do have an image for image view? I just do it with a constructor, NSLayoutConstraint. Okay? Here's what NSLayoutConstraint's constructor looks like. It's got all these things here. Let's go through them one at a time. One is, and it looks just like that inspector I showed you. So one is the thing we're trying to constrain, which is our image view. What attribute of that? Its width. How do we want to relate it to our constants and multipliers? Well, we're going to do aspect ratio, so we want the width multiplied times the height. So the width is going to equal the height times the aspect ratio, so this is going to be equal. And what are we relating it to? We could relate it to another thing, but this is the image view's own aspect ratio, so it's relating it to itself. Okay? And what attribute is it relating to? Its height. And what's the multiplier going to be? It's going to be that new image aspect ratio. Okay? And then this constant gets added in. We don't want to add anything else in. We just want to multiply. So here I am making this image view's width equal to its height times this multiplier. Make sense? That's the constraint I'm putting on it. That's how constraints work. That's all it is. Now, a couple things not good here. One is there's no such method, aspect ratio, on UI image. So I'm going to go down here and do an extension for that too. UI image var aspect ratio. It's going to be a CG float. I'm just going to return if my size.height is not 0, because I don't want to have divide by 0. Then I'm going to return size.width divided by size.height. Otherwise, I guess I'll just return 0. Okay, so I just added this var to UI image because I wanted it, and it makes my code read really nicely right here. Okay, perfectly reasonable. And the only other thing is, when I set this aspect ratio constraint, I'm creating it, but now I need to enforce it. So how do you enforce a constraint? If you have one in your hand, how do you enforce it? And it's very simple. You just add it as a constraint to the view. So I'm in my view controller here, so I'm going to add this constraint to my view. So in did set, anytime this aspect ratio gets set up here, this is where I set it, either to nil or this, then if I can let this new constraint equal the aspect ratio constraint, in other words, if it's not nil, then I'm going to tell my view, please add this constraint. Now, I also, by the way, when it's set, I want to remove any old constraint, because I might already have put a constraint from the previous image I was showing. So I'm going to say if let the existing constraint equal the aspect ratio constraint, and this is my will set, so this hasn't been set yet, then I'm going to say remove the constraint. Make sense? So that's it. Okay, that's all we need to do. So let's go ahead and run here. Actually, I'm going to go back to this view here, and oops, and our storyboard here. All right, so we're going to run this. I haven't changed the storyboard since last we talked, but now when we go mad bum here, this thing didn't work. So why does this not work? Because, sorry about this, forgot something. When I set my image, I'm not calling my new image property. I put all that nice code here inside this image property, right here, but I didn't call it. So here I'm actually calling that, so sorry about that. Why did it on there? Image view.image, oh, equals new value. Sorry about that. The new value. Let's go back here. All right, see when I rush, and I make mistakes there like that. Okay, oh, all right. Woo. I think that's the Giants logo down there. Well, at least it's the right aspect ratio. But clearly, it's terrible to have that thing there because it's too tiny, and we got all this space. So the last thing we're going to do is use the size classes to put this thing up here. Okay? So how do we do that? We go back to our storyboard right here. And right now, we've been doing all our work in this any. Okay? And what we want to do is, when we're regular height, we're going to put the name and the company underneath. So I'm going to go here to where it says any width, regular height. You see where it says along the top, any width, regular height? See that? I'm going to click there. Now I'm editing. You see the bar at the bottom is bright blue. That's to remind you, oh, hey, you are editing a specific size class here. But we're editing any width, regular height. And so here, here's something, this should be in red. If I was doing a slide, this would be in red, which is when you go to another size class and you're going to be moving things around, remove the constraints on the things you're going to be moving before you move them. Because once you start moving them, it's going to be hard to remember, what did that go to? So here I'm selecting these all, and I'm going to go over here and remove the constraints, clear the constraints only from the selected views, these three things I have selected. So I'm going to clear those constraints. Now they have no constraints. Now I'm just going to move them around to where I want. So I want that one there. I want these down here at the bottom. Put that in the corner, I'll put that on top of there, we'll put this down here like that. Now we'll put the new constraints. So now all new constraints that I'm making are only for this size class. Okay, not for any anymore. I've kind of forked off here. So let's put some new constraints on here. This one is leading space, this one is leading space, this one is bottom space. We want these separated. Vertical space, we want these two separated. We want this one over here, leading space. We want this to go all the way across and then go trailing space. We also want this one to go all the way across and trailing space. Okay. Again, we would probably go here. Let's see what we got here. Frames are different. That's good. Let's go ahead and update our frames. Okay, looks good. All looks good. Again, we would probably get rid of these magic numbers like this. We don't like that. We'd get rid of that. We did this one. We don't like that. We go select on this guy. Get this here. That. Same thing, this one. Okay, he got none. So we're good. We're good to go. So now we've created this size class. One has different arrangement of views and different constraints. So now when we run, we'll see here, mad bum again. There it is. It's using this space much more effectively, keeping this in its normal aspect ratio. But in this way, it goes back to the old way, to the any way, right? Okay, and this is true if we go to someone else, Hennessy, right there. Okay, see how that keeps the same aspect ratio and uses that space? Really uses the space nicely here? No. Now, why did that happen? Okay, because when I cleared the constraints here, okay, to make this new space, I also cleared this little constraint that went up here, this vertical spacing, right? This vertical spacing here wants to be the greater than or equal to and standard value. Okay, so sometimes when you go to another size class, you delete the constraint, you move things around, you still have to basically debug the new one just as much as the old one. So here now, let's go see if our illustrious leaders log in. It's good, and it is. Okay? All right, sorry to take so long. Thank you. I'll be here if you have any questions, and otherwise I'll see you on Wednesday.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.